This is Shar Selassie with Law for Love, here to share some love with you about marriage, faith, and family. In Deuteronomy 24, we see the law of Moses that allows for a man to divorce his wife if any uncleanness be found in her. The scripture will go on to say that that man was free to remarry and that wife was free to remarry. And there was a limitation put on their ability to remarry each other if the wife had been with another man. So we're not going to go down that trail, but I want to talk to you today about uncleanness and the legal right to divorce for uncleanness. Jesus talked about this and he revealed to us the higher law concerning divorce. So, number one, Jesus didn't hit the people, and who he was speaking to were the lawyers. He was speaking to the priests. He was speaking to the spiritual leaders when he said this. He said, Moses gave you the right to divorce because of the hardness of your heart. So we understand that covenant is forever, and the law provided an exception because of men's hearts. So that's the first thing he said. But what did we also know about the customs or the traditions of the people at the time? Well, this law was very liberal. It said that if any uncleanness be found in your wife, that you can divorce her. So what the custom had become was that the people were abusing, or just for any reason they wanted to get rid of their wife, they claim uncleanness, they could get a legal divorce. This is what lawyers do. This is what legal people do. Legal people say, well, the law say I could do this, so I'm going to do it. And they were freely practicing divorce without consequence. At least they thought it was without consequence. So Jesus came back and he said this, and this is where a lot of the modern faith community is limiting the treatment or the teaching of the law that Jesus was really showing us. He said this. He said, I tell you this, the higher law is that if you divorce your wife for any reason other than adultery, then you cause her to commit adultery if she marries another, and you're committing adultery if she marries another. So we teach that as a rule, that if someone comes to us and they want a divorce, they first gotta lead with, my spouse cheated on me. And if my spouse cheated on me, then I, as the church, am allowed to say, this is a biblical divorce. You have a right to divorce. It's a permissible divorce. You don't have to divorce because someone cheated on you, but you definitely have the right. So, moving from there, what was Jesus really saying? When you look at the original law, when you understand the ways of the Hebrew people, when you understand the priestly code, then you see that all of these prohibitions, number one, came from the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments tell us what to do and what not to do. The precepts and statutes that follow throughout the remaining of the books of the law explain to us why. Why did the Father say, do this, don't do that? The reason is this. You have to look at the priesthood to understand the reason. And the priesthood's job was to teach the difference between clean and unclean, the difference between holy and common. Because as a nation, as a kingdom, we are judged to the degree our nation, our people, our culture embrace uncleanness. Uncleanness brings judgment upon the kingdom. That is what the entire scripture is telling us. So what is the adultery that Jesus is speaking of? You know, it really took my husband to bring this to my attention, because I'm telling you that he is a man of those scriptures. And he tells people this. He says, when you get married, there's 2 marriages. The first is between you and the Father. The second is between you and your spouse. And that was profound, because this is what Jesus was saying. Jesus was saying, if there be any adultery, that is the only reason why you can divorce. Why? Because if you are living a clean lifestyle, no adultery in your own life, if you are living righteous and holy before the Most High, if you have no other God before Him, if you love the Father with all of your heart, your soul, and your might, and your spouse is idolatrous, then your spouse has committed adultery. And for that reason, you may divorce. The first adultery is between me and the Father. The first covenant that I break is between me and the covenant that I'm in with Jesus. See, I really want to encourage you to get this, because we have turned the scripture into a code of do's and don'ts. The law still applies. That's number one. So if we are teaching our sheep that the original law was set aside and done away with, that's the first error. That law is in full effect. Jesus said this. He said, I did not come to set the law aside. I came to fulfill the law. Fulfill it how? To fulfill it as the priest. That's why he wasn't seated on his throne when he came the first time. He came to fulfill the priestly role. But what we also know is this. In order for me to be in right standing, that I can come before the king and say, I am entitled to a divorce. I must be found blameless of idolatry. I must be found wholly and totally committed to the Father. What does that tell us today about men and women in marriages that are suffering, men and women in families that are in crisis, a culture that is plagued with divorce? I need to turn and I need to examine my own heart for any idol that is standing in between me and my Father. I cannot come and accuse my spouse without first examining myself. And what is Jesus is challenging us to do, he says, examine yourself. And if no idol be found in you, you have a right to divorce. That's it, y'all. If you be found clean and the other unclean, you have a right to divorce, because the other has committed adultery. How do I support that? Because Jesus said to look at a woman with lust is to commit adultery with her. That is the higher law. And this is what we have to understand so that we can prosper. This is what we have to understand so that we can be strong as families and as community. These are the higher laws that the Father is calling us up to. He's saying, come up and be cleansed of your idolatry. Come up and worship me with all of your heart, soul, and mind. Come up and worship me in spirit and in truth. My law is still fully valid. Don't add to it and don't take away from it. This is Shar with Law for Love, and we are honored to partner with you in the fight for families.